So this first speaker this hour is Dr. Jean Woodward. She is an extinction plant pathologist and focusing on ornamentals, forestry, Christmas trees, legume forages, the Department of Plant Pathology. Jean, the floor is yours.
I just wanted to give you an update on some disease problems that we're having. There's a lot of disease out there, depending upon where you're looking. In some ways, this year was not as exciting a disease year, not for me, mainly because I didn't see as much of it as I would like to or normally would. But one of the things we are seeing is still Phytophthora is out there causing problems on many different plants within the landscape, but also in the picture here on the upper left-hand side, causing problems still in some annual vinca that's there. It's something to be looking for next year. There's also a lot of leaf spot diseases that are out. This is a Cercospora leaf spot, in the center left. And at this time of the year, there really isn't anything you can do for some of these leaf spot diseases. The leaves are going to fall on the deciduous plants, and there's nothing you're going to be able to do for them at this point. It's something to think about for next year. So maybe we need a spring update as well. The next picture is a Pathology needle blight. I am seeing that still showing up on Leyland cypress. I've talked about that at some of the other different trainings we've done over this year, but that is something that's still going to be continuing to be a problem on Leyland cypress and some of the Chinese arborvitae and even some of the cryptomeria. But it's something that right now you can apply some fungicides. It's not going to do much for this year, but it can help to prevent infection next year. And then I also have some powdery mildew pictures there on the very end. And because powdery mildew is very common at this time of the year too. At this time of the year, though, it's probably nothing you need to worry about or do anything about. It's going to be more cosmetic and not something that I'm going to care about. One of the things I wanted to really talk about is actually some newer things. And one of the things you may be hearing about is something called vascular streak dieback. And this is something I have talked about before, but it is something we're working on. So I'm involved with a working group trying to figure this disease out, or if it is truly a disease. The organism is now being called Rhizoctonia theobromii. I know I previously, when I talked about this, it called it Ceratobasidium, and it caused the most closely related kind of genetic sequence that is in our database is to a thread blight pathogen on cacao from Southeast Asia. And so we don't really know much about this one. One of the problems is that we can't culture this. So if we can't culture it, we can't even we're having difficulty trying to prove that it's truly a pathogen. The type of symptoms it causes is like here on this red bud is this scorching. And the scorching can be a kind of a yellowing of the leaves, plus also this interveinal necrosis and even dieback. And the dieback that we're seeing it's affecting a lot of red buds. And that's been the one that I think I've seen it the most here in Georgia. But other states, surrounding states, have seen it also on quite a bit of red maple. Even down in Florida, it was most recently reported down, causing a major problem on the red maples in Florida. But then other states are responding it on dogwoods as well. We are seeing a ton of dogwood dieback. And I get questions all the time about that, where everybody wants to say, what's causing the dieback? And the problem is that there's not just one thing on the dieback causing dieback on the dogwoods. It's a collection of things. And one of it could be potentially this organism, but it's mostly environmental stress. It's years of abuse. It's included bark, girdling roots, all kinds of things that are combining that's actually causing some of the dieback on some of the dogwoods. This organism here, this Rhizoctonia theobromii, has been found, like I said, on redbud, dogwood, and red maples, but it's also been found on wax myrtle, Nyssa, calycanthus, magnolias, spicebush, as well as several other different plant species. And the problem is where we start looking at it, is it truly a pathogen? Is we can find the symptoms from this, and see these symptoms on trees. And it definitely looks like it's causing dieback, but it's also being found on things that you would never expect it to be there, like a calycanthus that's in a landscape that's been planted in the landscape for the last 15 years. So we don't know for sure what to do about this kind of problem, as well as also, is it truly a pathogen or not? I'm trying to find it. I'm trying to work with my colleagues and trying to identify it, try to work on better tests so we can detect it. And so we can start trying to work on management for this. So we are trying to do some of these surveys. So if you are seeing something about it, I'd love to know about it. Some of the other symptoms that we're seeing are that you get the dieback, like here in the picture on the left-hand side, but also you can get stem discoloration and even dieback. You can see the small shoot here in the middle that has been killed. When I scrape through the bark, there is internal discoloration. When you scrape through the bark on plants with this vascular streak dieback, is that we see more black streaks or brown streaking happening in the vascular tissue. And then if you incubate it, you get hyphae that would start growing off of that. And so the picture on the right-hand side, as you can see, there's some hyphae that is here, and if it can get quite extensive. So we know that it's a fungus. We just can't get it to grow in culture. And nobody has been able to successfully inoculate new plants and prove pathogenicity. So it's actively being worked on and looked at. We just don't have great answers yet for this. But like I said, we are looking for it. And so if you are having issues, I would like to know about it as well. The other thing I wanted to talk about was some about Boxwood blight. We are still seeing Boxwood blight showing up. We're still getting samples in our plant disease clinic with Boxwood blight, but I am having a lot of people who are saying that the plants are looking good. And even plants that were infected are looking good. And as a plant pathologist, we like to see death. We like to see destruction. And even in my own plants, some of the plants are actually looking okay. But Boxwood blight is caused by the fungus. That's the Calanectria pseudoniviculata. It prefers cool, moderate temperatures with a lot of high humidity and moisture. So during the summer months, we often see Boxwood blight seem to disappear or just not become as prominent as much, unless you're in a very shaded area or areas that have like a garden that's underneath a lot of shade, or if there's a lot of moisture. So the plants are being irrigated a lot, or there's a lot of activity, and especially animal activity and pet activity out there. But it tends to seem to disappear. And I think it can give people a false sense of security of saying, hey, I've cured the problem. The fungicides I'm using are working. And then winter comes. And if we have cool, wet conditions, especially with hurricanes, we can see a lot of problems. And this is one of the things I wanted to show here, is that this is a field site that I have a graduate student who's working on this disease. And the center plant in this area, I hope you can see a pointer maybe, is that the center plant was inoculated. And we've been monitoring and watching the disease spread to the adjacent plants. And it has spread. But when we went out here, this picture was taken in June of this year. As a pathologist, I was like, dang it, it's not dying. Like where it happened to my symptoms. And so it looked okay. But in June, we were also very hot and dry. And so we didn't see the problem or weren't seeing as many symptoms. If I moved the branches apart, which is this picture here on the right-hand side, I can easily see some of the black stem lesions that are present, which is one of the common symptoms associated with Boxwood blight. I would also see a lot of dieback and dead leaves inside the canopy. And that's the pathogen. That's the disease sitting there waiting for really the right environmental conditions for it to then infect the surrounding plants and the surrounding leaves and spread the disease. So as we started getting wetter, the symptoms are now showing up again. So it's something that I do see that people may think, and I've had people tell me their fungicides are working, things are doing great, and except that it's not. Eventually, things do start catching up because the disease does not go away. And so, one of the things that we are looking at is also some of the different symptoms that we may see, some of the survival of this pathogen in the landscapes. And this is just a picture of some of the different symptoms. We talk about leaf spots as being one of the primary symptoms. That's on the left-hand side. However, I don't see leaf spots as being the primary thing. When I'm being called out and looking at different landscapes, and even in gardens or nurseries, looking for it, my first thing I look for are fallen leaves. If I see a lot of plant defoliation and fallen leaves that are sitting underneath those plants, especially the leaves that fall when they're still green, that's more a symptom of boxwood blight for me. We do get leaf spots. That is one of the pictures I've taken of leaf spots, but it's not always as obvious as the leaf spots. And so start looking for thinning of the canopy, especially lower in the branches. And then you will start seeing some fallen leaf litter. And that's one of the things I start looking for. Sometimes the symptoms can look like just off-colored shoots. And if you looked at those shoots, you'd start seeing those black stem lesions. They can also be the patches of just areas of death within the canopy as well. And that's what we tend to see as it starts getting the disease progression within that plant starts occurring. Or getting worse is what I mean. It's still being spread by animals on animal fur, also worker activity. So being picked up on clothing, or the spores can be picked up on clothing. So that's something to be concerned about as well. This is just an example here of the plants here in the front. Those ones that are dying, those were newly introduced plants about 2 to 3 years prior to me taking this picture, that those plants were the source of the infection in this one garden. And introduction of infected plants is still the primary means for this to be spread around and introduced into areas. But from these plants here, it did infect 70-year-old English boxwoods. So this was a historic area, or basically an older plantation home that, like they knew that the grandmother had planted these boxwoods. And so on one side of the area, you could start seeing the dieback and the browning of the foliage. But then just adjacent to it on the other side, you can see almost complete death. And these plants they died, and they were killed by boxwood blight. So something still to be concerned about. Okay. The one thing I wanted to tell you was about control, is that the best way to try to reduce the spread is to disinfect yourself, your tools, your gloves. And the best thing you can use is either 70% ethanol or the isopropyl alcohol, which is your rubbing alcohol straight from the bottle, or you could use like a Lysol disinfecting spray. And that's going to help on trying to kill the spores that are on a surface. That will help to prevent the spread of it, especially if you're the one in those areas working with it. Fungicides are effective. The most effective fungicides are chlorothalonil and fludeoxonil. Those products should be used on a 7 to 14-day interval to be effective. So when people tell me all they're doing is spraying once a month, that's basically prophylactic. It's something might have some effect, but you're really not controlling everything. The other group of fungicides that are effective are triazoles, which are the DMI fungicides in track group 3. That's things that are like tebuconazole, propiconazole, or the newer product that's only labeled in nurseries is the mefentriflunaconazole. It's a mouthful, but that's Aveyo, which is also not an easy one to say, but that's the product name. Keeping infected plants out is probably the most important thing for disease management on that. And then the last thing I just wanted to show you, just a picture, and I've showed this before, but these are just an example of the trial that I did, just spraying cotton and seeing if I could reduce the amount of infection I would get of the boxwood leaves, and see if the products would actually kill the spores. And the two here on the right-hand side is the upper one is the ready-to-use Lysol disinfectant spray. And then the bottom is the 70% ethanol. And you can see that there's no growth in those two trays, but there is growth on the others, which is like our water control and the Lysol concentrate. So those products are very effective in actually killing the spores. That's what I just up close picture of that. And so it's something that you can keep around. But this would not just be for Boxwood blight. It would be for any disease management. If you're trying to disinfest your pruning tools, disinfesting your work gloves, boots, pants, you can spray things with the Lysol, and it actually is very effective in killing our pathogens. And I think that was, last thing I wanted to mention was if you're sloppy and just spraying like the Lysol, and this is what this is in one trial. I had help doing a trial with a student worker, and I wasn't very specific on how to actually spray the Lysol spray. And so they just held it in one spot, like it is here on the right-hand side or the left-hand side. It killed everything that was right underneath that spray, but just right outside of where that spray hit, you got a lot of the Boxwood blight actually producing its microsclerotia and spores on that surface. And then also if you're using it as a spray, whether it's ethanol or the Lysol, and you are just stinging it over the top or hitting certain areas, some areas are going to be protected, but then other areas where you miss, you're going to still have a lot of infection. So I call this kind of be careful. Don't just spray Lysol like you're spraying on perfume or something. Be deliberate about spraying it on so that you're basically saying 1 second, just 1/1000 over top of an area as you are spraying it. And that would be enough. Okay. So that's what I think Shimat's like looking at me, but I'm probably done now, but that's all I really had. There's just a lot of other Boxwood things out there. We're still seeing a lot of the Horticulture Dieback, a lot of Phytophthora. They're just common. They're always out there. The only other last thing I had was really just some of the fungicides, the methyltriflunaconazole. I have not said these words enough to have them roll off my tongue, but that one is the Avelio is the fungicide from BASF. That's a newer one, and it's actually really good, but it's only labeled for nurseries and greenhouses. And it is one of the few that's actually labeled for Boxwood blight, but it also does a good job on Phalaenopsis, like black root rot, which we are limited in what we have available for that. The other one that came out this past year is Postiva, and that's a one from Syngenta, and it's a combination product, and it's in frac group 7 and 3. And I'd been practicing how to say this Phytophthora, whatever it is. I have not been able to say that well. But it does have 2 different chemistries, very broad spectrum. It is labeled for nurseries, greenhouses, commercial and residential landscapes. It has a very broad spectrum activity. It is really good on things like botrytis and fusarium. It is also a fungicide that has bacterial disease control. So it actually can control bacterial diseases that are caused by Xanthomonas and Pseudomonas, which is very unique within some of the fungicides. The only caveat I'll give for this product is that I've had growers who say they've tried it and they didn't like it. It didn't work for them. Other ones have said it has worked for them and they like it, but it is very rate dependent. So read the labeling and read some of the product information that comes from the company, because that has been where it hasn't worked, has been when the rates have been off, and they've usually been too low for them to be effective. For the rate that was used was too low. So do read the label if you are using this product, but it is a very good product to start incorporating into your spray program. So that's all I had.
Thank you so much, Lee. Was a
All
wonderful
right.
talk. So I would say let's move on with the next speaker. Next speaker is Dr. Mark Czarnota, an associate professor with Department of Horticulture. So his areas of that can be leaf plants. Mark, you can share your screen.
We go and share screen. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, hold on a sec. I got to start from the beginning. We'll get it here. Okay. So I was just my presentation should be pretty short here, so that'll help out. But can you hear me okay and see everything?
Yes.
Okay, great. Anyway, I thought about what to talk about today, and this year I've gotten a lot of herbicide damage pictures and had to deal with a bunch of herbicide problems, and that even developed into court cases. But anyway, I just want to go over a couple basic ones and then talk about some herbicides that we're having issues with. Patrick talked about a few of those herbicides also are in my lane, so to speak, but the only one that was really simazine, but it's just some label changes are going to happen with that as far as applications. And it's really not even on my radar screen, but I just want to go over some of these that I see often and we have problems with. And most of these can be prevented. One of them couldn't, I don't think, but the glyphosate ones can. And I'm going to talk a little bit about glyphosate at the end because everybody knows the litigation problems if you've been watching TV. But anyway, this is a perfect example. This is a standard crepe myrtle that is out there. This was at a nursery, and basically what they were doing was spraying the base of this plant. Crepe myrtles sucker quite a bit, and they were actually spraying the base of this plant with glyphosate. I had given the guy a pre-emergent herbicide program, and he wanted to pin that damage on some pre-emergent herbicides, which, if anybody knows anything about a lot of pre-emergent herbicides, are not mobile in the plant. They don't move around, so they wouldn't cause damage like this. But when I questioned him, they were telling me how much glyphosate they were using before, and this is what happened. So basically, he was spraying down at the base of this plant on top of the the suckers that were cut. They absorbed their glyphosate right through that and caused they call this a sublethal dose, where you get enough glyphosate in the plant, you cause damage. And most people don't know you can get glyphosate in the plant and not have any damage at all. And because the plants are tolerant to it. And of course, that depends on the species and all that. But this is what you're going to see. This is just what it would look like. A regular shoot would be the right if you're looking at it. And then to the left would be one that was showing damage from glyphosate, where you're starting to have severe damage. And just so you know, this plant's not going to come out of this damage anytime soon. It's going to take a little bit of time for this plant to come out, 2-3 years on a plant like this. So it gets to a point where it's not going to be selling. This is another one where they were spraying also at the base of the plant, called crepe myrtle, a real thin skin plant. If the woody plant has real thin skin, you're going to see stuff like this. And you can see on the plant's trying to bury buds and trying to come out, but just can't. And they were, again, just spraying around the base of the plant every time they sprayed glyphosate. And this is what happens. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen this with crepe myrtles. But other plants are also problematic too. But if it's a real thick bark plant, you can get away with some of these. And if the tree has a wrap on it, that really helps too. I deal with this in blueberries, and they can get away with that when they're younger plants. But the same symptomology can happen. And this gets really confusing too, because the growth regulator herbicides also cause damage like this. So you really got to ask questions, ask what they're doing. And then you can do foliar analysis, but in all my experiences with court cases and everything else, I can look at that plant and tell you it's damaged, and more than likely by a few herbicides, and then you'll send foliar samples out and they can't find it. And the reason for that is it's not that it's not there. It's just there's so much cellular material that have the same compounds in there and have the same molecular weights as glyphosate. It's really hard not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And it can be very frustrating to find those type compounds and prove it. Where's my smoking gun at? This would be what it would look like in several nursery operations I deal with. They constantly will leave glyphosate in the tanks, and they won't have enough of them to where if you're a grower and you're growing plant material and you spray fungicides and insecticides and you also spray herbicides, you really need to keep those two separate. As you spray a lot of glyphosate, you really need to keep the tanks separate just for glyphosate applications. Because if you don't, you get damage like this. And then a lot of times it'll look like a fungal problem, and it's not. and you got to start asking a bunch of questions of what they did. And the best is when somebody doesn't clean the tank out, leaves a little bit of water in there with glyphosate, then they mix in a fungicide and go and spray their plants for a fungal problem. And lo and behold, you have issues like this. Another crepe myrtle out in the parking lot. This guy, there was probably 30 of these that I saw when this picture was taken. And these plants aren't coming back. They need to be removed or replanted. The good thing about glyphosate, though, you don't have to worry about a soil carryover. You can tear the plant out and replant immediately, and it should be fine. But again, you're seeing the sublethal dose damage of the crepe myrtle, and that's screaming glyphosate damage to me. There's not the twisting that you'd see a lot if you start getting sublethal doses of the growth regulator herbicides. This is the damage you're going to see. Got a lot of Dicamba damage I've come across this year. A lot of questions from the agents. Of course, we don't have a DDDI system anymore, thanks to the grand wisdom of our administrators, and which I thought was a wonderful system. And it had so much information on there. And of course, that was all gotten rid of. And 20 years of information of me typing stuff on there was gone, which I thought was terrible. But anyway, this is what you'd see. And most of the turf products that people have, what Patrick will recommend, or Lisa Ames will recommend to homeowners, will be three-way mixes. The most common one's Trinex Southern, but there's a whole bunch of Trinex out there. But there's a lot of them. And if they have dicamba in that product or MCPP, that product can be reabsorbed or drifted onto the plant and cause damage like this. This damage that you're seeing on this it was pretty minor. They could prune this out and get away with this, but it's just damage you don't want to see. And then if they're going to spray these type products, they need to not spray them at least within the root zone. Try to make sure you avoid drift at all costs, everything you can do, and you can avoid situations like this. Crepe myrtle, this was some dicamba damage I saw. And as you can see, it's very similar to glyphosate when you get the bud blasting type effects. But if you start looking close at these, they start having some twisting and clouds, and it would be with glyphosate, and that's what we're seeing here. This was a great one too. I've run into this twice, once before the pandemic started, and then just this year I had another issue. There's a lot of these gated communities that people where they don't do anything to the house. They pay this fee, which some astronomical fee they have to pay, which I think most faculty members, we couldn't afford to live here. But anyway, you go out here and then you'll get all these trees that are 3-4 inch caliper that have been implanted for 3-4 years, and they're showing dicamba growth regulator damage. And I'm certain it's dicamba causing this. Half tree be alive or trying to bud out. And you look at the turf grass and there won't be a weed in the turf grass at all. And then I asked them to give me the turf grass herbicide applications that they've made. And they've made Trimec applications twice a year, every year, and around the tree, and there's no weeds. So I asked them, is there any reason why you're spraying Trimec and you don't have any weeds in the turf grass? Do you have some threshold that you use? No, we just spray it on the April 15th and October or something, October 20th. And then if there's ever more of a need for people to understand herbicides, this is it. But if I direct them and tell them to come up some threshold that do not use products, growth rate, post-emergent herbicides unless they're necessary. And when you see the actual weeds there, you come in with that and use the product to help clean the yard up, and then maintain a pre-emergent herbicide program because you don't run into problems like this. But there were probably over 400 trees in this particular site that were damaged that person was going to have to pay for. And if you start pricing out a tree like that, you're looking at about $600-800. Plus you're going to take that one out, put another one in, and then probably half those trees, I would guess, weren't going to come back in a reasonable amount of time. I usually recommend they let it sit a year, see if it comes back, and then start negotiating with the people that you're going to replace it. Otherwise, it's going to be a lawsuit. And of course, I can't serve as an expert witness in our state, and then I hand it off to the Department of Ag. But this could have been totally avoided if they wouldn't have put out those three-way mix applications. Flumioxazine damage, which is sold under the trade name Broadstar, or ShoreGuard would be the other one, the sprayable. Broadstar is granular. These are the type of damages you'll see with these burning type herbicides. And the good thing about this is real transient damage. I've got multiple pictures with people with problems this year. We have a lot of container growers using these products. And basically, I'll tell them not to use these products on the flumioxazin on some particular ornamentals, particularly pittosporums and hydrangeas. And of course, hydrangeas are so popular. And but anyway, if they would have knocked the granular off of this particular one on the hydrangea on the left, they would have avoided the damage. But the granulars will get down and stuck in that little leaf whorl. You get you get a irrigation event, and the herbicide starts oozing out, and it causes damage. It's a burning type herbicide, and that's what you'll see. And if you just clip that out, it'll go away and regrow. But if they just would avoid applications like that, they would have no problem. And of course, if they read the label at all, they would realize that hydrangeas weren't on there. Okay, this was one I just had about 3 weeks ago. I took this. This is actually dithiopyr damage, and this is going to turn out to be a mess, I think. But anyway, there's a pre-emergent herbicide that we have now that has dithiopyr and isoxaben in it. It's a great combo mix. But what happened here, I think, is the guy got a little heavy-handed with it, but it was hard to figure what he had done because I wasn't there when he was putting the product out. But he only put out about 8 bags of this product, probably on $500,000 worth of nursery material. But there's a lot of it doesn't look well, and I could show you. But this is dithiopyr is a very strange herbicide. It's a growth regulator herbicide we use as a pre-herbicide, and it's safe on most woody ornamentals with no problem. But if you get the rates too high, it causes problems. This was the ends of cryptomeria where they were swelling up at the end. And then this is real classic injury for the picolinic acid herbicides, which are growth regulator type herbicides. But if I started looking at the elms he had and red maples, and they're pretty bad. And these I doubt these are going to come back. If you look at the foliage up close, this was a classic one where I think this is an over application. It's going to be hard. I'm still brewing on exactly what happened with a bunch of questions, but I've tested this product a bunch. I never have any issues with it. All the herbicides I deal with, they want a 2x level of safety with all the pre-herbicides. And you can see the leaf puckering in this, and it's just classic growth regulator herbicide. And the other component, isoxaben, in the herbicide he was using wouldn't do this. Just real briefly, I want to talk about 2 herbicides we have some issues with. First, Surflan, which is a big go-to product for me. Most people don't realize this, but it was gone, and the plant burned down in Texas back in 2019, right before the pandemic started. And anyway, it was gone because that was the last people making the active ingredient. Adama and UPL were major distributors of Rizoline. It's been off patent for years. It used to be Dow Agro. They patented it and made it. I think it was actually SIVA that patented it. But Adama was in negotiations with a Chinese manufacturing company about a year or 2 ago to bring back Rizoline, but the negotiations failed. The Chinese wanted them to make far too much they could sell, and they wanted to lock them into a 5-year plan. You need to look at Pennant Magnum. Works great. It's a great tank mix for gallery. If you're going to do that, the rate's going to be 20 to 40 ounces per acre. 1 app per year, 24-hour REI. You can tank mix with simazine or gallery is what I'd recommend. Great pre-control, very safe. You can be very sloppy with this product and get away with it. And then you can see Surflan is the one that we're losing. These are all the pre's that are available to the industry. But the problem I had is the combo herbicides. Rout's a very popular herbicide, and it has Rizoline, and Amaze is really popular for homeowners, and we're losing both those. Because once the actives are gone, once the product manufactured or formulated product's gone, these products are gone unless they're getting it from someplace else that I don't know where it's coming from. And also, if you look at the Fortress and the Crew, that was a product that gentleman was using with the dithiopyr damage. That's a pre, and it's a great pre-emergent herbicide. But again, I think he probably got up in the 4x range of over application and caused problems. But it's actually a great herbicide. Works really well. Everybody's hearing about glyphosate, and just so you're aware, it was marketed in 1974 as a non-selective herbicide first time it came out. The California jury awarded $268 million to a plaintiff, which opened up the doors for litigation. There's been about $21 billion set aside for glyphosate litigation. And anyway, it's so bad that investment groups are actually funding claims against Bayer. That's how sad this industry, or some of the lawyers, can be, because they're gambling bear's going to pay out, and they're going to earn probably twice the money when they pay the lawyers and the people up front. So I don't know how that's working, but that's the rumor mill that's out. So of course I'm on the other side, but anyway, it's very interesting. Bayer's going to stop selling glyphosate for residential use in 2023. Other companies will have the opportunity to sell the product in different formulations to homeowners. The homeowners will probably not be able to get greater than 41% glyphosate concentrate. I'm thinking 20 will be the highest, and it might be larger than that. And you're possibly going to see glyphosate products with cancer repercussions. They're fighting that right now like a pack of cigarettes. So I don't know what's going to happen. This is all subject to change. Anyway, that's all I have. Some questions, if you have any, I'd be happy to try to answer.
Thank you, Mark. So I think we have one question. I can see that. What will kill sand spurs and not harm my pecan trees in my yard?
I'm sorry, I missed that. You had sand spurs on pecan trees in your yard?
Yes, not want to kill the pecan trees, but you want to see kill the sand spurs.
The sand spur, they could control that pretty easily in pecans with Glyphosate, which is sold under a couple different trade names. The label they'd have to use for pecans would be, it's called Select Max. That works really well. And they also want to get on a pre-emergent herbicide program for pecans. And I don't know how many pecans they have. I have to deal with that but anyway, there's a product called Allion, works very well at controlling. It gives you about 14 weeks of pre-emergent weed control in blueberries, blackberry, pecans, peaches, apples, and also the product Brookstar, that one I mentioned, or SureGuard. That's actually sold as a sprayable product called Chateau. You'd want to put an application down in January, February, again in probably April, May, and also again in probably around July, August, September. And that would keep it clean for the year. And then, but if they do have some breakthrough, they can use Select Max or Select, and it's the same product as Envoy. And they can also use glyphosate underneath a pecan tree. And then the bark is pretty thick on pecans. You can get away with spraying one application a year. It's usually not a problem unless you really slop it on the tree roots in the tree. It shouldn't be an issue. But sand spurs can be awful. We have several weeds that have armored or picky fruits that cause issues that people don't like, but that's one of them.
Thanks, Mark. And Jean, I don't see any more questions. But what I would do is just briefly go over. So my name is Shimat Joseph. I'm with the Department of Entomology, and I have ornamental responsibility. So just want to make sure that you should keep in mind that this is not reported in Georgia yet, or it's not established in Georgia anywhere. So we don't have any reports already established population of this particular pest. We call it as spotted lanternfly, and it's native to China, India, and in Vietnam. It is not a fly, as the name says, lanternfly. It's not a fly; it's a plant hopper, and you can see it doesn't look like a fly. And the thing is that you can go after so many species of plants, ornamental plants. Like crops, grapes. There are some crops that can be grown like peaches and grapes in particular, but it can affect so many other plants. So when I say plants here, we're talking about trees. That's what we are basically going after. It was introduced in 2014 in Pennsylvania, and you can see it's going all different directions, even though the region of introduction is quarantine. It is reported in South Carolina, but not yet in Georgia. So let's start giving heads up. It is coming on our way. I don't know what's going to do in our state, but this is something that we should keep in mind. So it likes the tree of heaven, Elanthus, and we don't have a lot of Elanthus in our state, but it can go there. Apple, plum species, all the plum cherries, they're all very susceptible hosts. Grapes, they are also very important crop host for this, also for as a host. In addition to that, there are all other different hosts that thing that's important to us, like dogwood, maple. So there's a small study that in Pennsylvania that shows that in the parking lots or in the urban areas, like to go after maple. That's not a good news for us. So just a quick about their life cycle in particular. If you see that pigs are laid vertically and they put a cement on it, a muddy patch on it, that usually happens in the fall. Turtles will lay eggs like that, and they overwinter as eggs, and they hatch in the springtime, and they go through three stars. And you can see there are black and white spots, the first three in star series. As they become bigger, you start seeing this red color. It's very attractive color, very beautiful looking bird in a way. But and through July to August, they develop into adults and start feeding. Got into stages, and adults can feed, and they start laying eggs, and it goes on like that. So it's one generation per year, and eggs are basically the all-week egg stage. So adults, they are big, like an inch long, and you can see this coloration, the gray color, they come up like really well with the barn. And this is how they lay eggs and the egg stage. This is what they look like. It's more like a muddy patch. And you might see different variation of that muddy patch. About 30 to 50 eggs per match. That's how they lay eggs. And like I said, they go through different stars, and they're black and white in the beginning, then you start seeing more red patch appearing. Another photo of that. And damage wise, it's not a tree killer. So that's good news. But the problem is that they secrete these excrements, and that brings out a lot of sooty mold. And they produce so much excrement, that is the sap that they feed on, that the fung and other bacteria and fungus and everything goes down, becomes really a mess. As you can see on these pictures. So how they get around? Egg masses. So egg masses, they lay anywhere they can find. And so that's something that we have to keep an eye. Anything coming from north, and that's where they move on. Whether cars, any trucks, trailer trucks, or any vehicles from north, and especially from the area, that's how this kind of move around. And with the sake of time, I will stop here. Okay, so this is some an important base that we have to keep an eye and keep in our horizon. And if there is any reports, anything that we've seen, anything like that, let us know, and also your agents. That's the first line of people that you need to let the UG agents know that you're saying something and that is suspect for as well. And I will just conclude here for the sake of time. And thank you so much for all the speakers, especially for Bodie. She did run out of time and she couldn't present her talk.
I do want to add something, Shimat.
Sure.
We do have Tree of Haven, and we have quite a bit of it. I am really unhappy to hear that there are so many of our trees and shrubs that could be potential hosts. So, little last question. Did you not show a picture that someone had taken from Florida, or this was just someone that is associated with Florida, or what was that?
Yeah, this is not reported in Florida yet. So
Okay,
it's
good.
going to be a person maybe posted from there or something like that.
Thank
It's
you.
not reported in Florida. So thank you so much once again for all the speakers. And I will let you take over from here.
All right. Thank you both, and all of our speakers who are still with us. We appreciate you making time and helping us carry this off without too many hitches. I'm only sorry we didn't have time for everybody. Shimat said, any questions, anything you didn't get a chance to ask or have answered today, you can go ahead and send that to us. You'll get a follow-up email from us. So if you want to go ahead and send those in, you can.